Oh, see, I'll follow you for more free tips.
Good morning. Thank you for being here this morning as we start, we actually started our budget process during the workshop time, and I know many of you in the room started that budget process a long time ago, so you are in full swing of the budget process. But thank you this morning for being here. This is the first reading, and I will turn it over to Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. Good morning.
Good morning.
Had the opportunity today to formally present for the first time the proposed recommended budget from the administration for fiscal year 24. As you indicated, we'd already had an earlier session, a workshop session, that we had really actually broken into two parts. One kind of an overview and background of the budget and the budget process, and then secondly to discuss more specifics. And one thing that we did not talk a lot about in the workshop is kind of the nuts and bolts of the internal process. So as we start out this morning, we want to share a little bit with you about how the internal process works, the timeline, and you alluded to that in your comments, Ms. Bush, that there are people in the room that have been working on this for a considerable number of months now and a significant amount of time. So the way that's structured is the overall leadership and management of the general fund budget recommendation is conducted by the superintendent and the senior leadership team. When you think about the senior leadership team, we've got an overall district leadership team, which is basically divided between instruction and operations. The senior leadership team are the most senior officials in the district, and if you look around that table, everyone in the district ultimately reports to one of those people. So it's the chief finance officer, it's the chief human resources officer, it's the associate superintendent for academics, it's the associate superintendent for operations, it's the deputy superintendent, as well as governmental relations and communications, Ms. Fitzer, some other individuals. But that's the team that guides the overall process. Most of the detail work, as far as assembling the information, is conducted through Budget Services in the Department of Finance, who does both the budget preparation and the analytics for the management and development of resources in support of the district's education and financial goals. That's 4 words to say 2 words: support of the district's strategic plan, because all of this is based on the strategic plan. The department assists school and department staff in their budgeting efforts so programs can be implemented to raise academic challenge and performance of each student and provide a school environment supportive of learning. The general fund budget process begins almost immediately following the end of the audit for the prior fiscal year. In October, a calendar is prepared to schedule all stakeholder meetings, district budget committee meetings, board work session, public input, and formal readings with the board. Planning is key to ensure our timeline coincides with the legislative calendar to the best of our ability to do so, that it meets state and board statutory and policy requirements, and that it allows time for staff to implement the improved budget. Additional preparation is required in November when the line item document and program documents are prepared for budget process. These documents utilize information from our system but require a significant amount of manual preparation for user-friendly formatting, as user-friendly as it is. But it's as user-friendly as it can be, because there's a huge amount of detailed information in it. And there is not, unlike what some people might think, there is not a button they can push over there that will just create that. Throughout the strategic plan process, new requests are thoroughly researched and documented so all relevant supporting data is in one place for the district budget committee to begin review in February. A summary document is prepared to ensure all items are being considered together for efficiencies and to avoid duplication. Throughout the strategic plan process, we seek feedback from a broad-based group of stakeholders. And you've seen a presentation on that recently, the strategic planning process for the period that is upcoming, in order to develop the goals and strategies for a 5-year period. Budget development is focused on achieving the strategic plan goals, implementing its strategies, and meeting its targets. Formal input is also requested annually from teachers and principals to inform the district budget. Principals are asked to solicit input from their school communities as a part of this process. Information from those meetings is summarized and presented to the Budget Committee, and it's included in the work session appendix documents. And you saw some of that during the work session. We talked about it, things that we considered, costed out, some of which we could include, some of which we could not. Once every 2 to 3 years, we literally take every department budget back to zero. We don't do that every year because of the extremely time-consuming process. Now, they review every budget every year, but we go back to zero. And although it's not in here, probably a good time to think back. Some of you will recall, you were here then. In 2010, 11, in that time frame, we removed about $72 million in expenses from the general fund budget over a 2 to 3 year period. So this was a significantly retrenched budget, and since then has been built back to where it is today through this process we're engaging in now. So not only zero-based every 2 to 3 years, significant change occurred in it. Now, most of that had to be accomplished through changing pupil-teacher ratio because, as you all already know, our money is expended on people. All but about 60-some-odd million dollars in this budget we're presenting today, it's on people. And that's the only place where that's where significant cost exists, and that's the only place where there's significant opportunity to reduce costs if you have to do that. But we go back to zero-based. This year is a year that we're going back to zero-based internally with all those departments. This November, an additional resource planning document was prepared and distributed to utilize with this assignment. With the zero-based budgeting process, each department is required to meet with the deputy superintendent, the chief finance officer, and the budget staff. They explain how each item is essential to the department's goals and have the opportunity to repurpose funds within a department or reduce funds if they're no longer needed. Funds may be repurposed for process changes, obsolescence, etc. These meetings occur in January, providing time to compile information to bring forward to the district budget committee meetings in February as necessary. The state legislative budget process begins in January with proposals from both the governor and the state superintendent of education. Both proposals are reviewed for fiscal impacts. This is also when the House and Senate begin discussions on the appropriations bill, budget bill for the next fiscal year. As the appropriations bill moves through the State House with hearings and committee meetings, we continuously monitor for bills and proviso changes. As you all know, the legislature can stick a proviso on the budget and significantly alter what happens with our funding. In fact, the formula on which the state funds are distributed to us both this year we're in and for next year is not in permanent law, it's in proviso. The final general appropriations bill is submitted to the governor for ratification. In January, updated employee health elections take effect and are recorded in our business management software. An updated analysis of current employee salary and benefit cost is completed, and complex spreadsheet templates using that information are created to begin projecting salary cost for the next fiscal year. Average salary information is calculated, and statistical information is collected from the state and other external sources to utilize with the budget presentation. All of our fringe benefit costs are driven by actions beyond our control. We are all required, all school districts in South Carolina are required to have their employees participate in the state health care plan. So that's determined at the state level, as are the costs associated with that based on the plan that's selected by the state. Retirement, our employees are required to, one, either participate in the state retirement system or the optional state retirement system, both of which have a required match from us, from the school district, as their employer. That cost is determined by the state. Student projection information is received in February, and teacher allocations are calculated using board-approved student-teacher ratios and allocated on personnel baselines. And obviously, the reason we do that in February is we want our principals to be able to be out there and be hiring at the prime time to hire new teachers. All other formula teacher, non-teacher allocations are calculated and verified with departments, including special education, G&T, multilingual, 4K, nurses, related arts, etc. Personnel baselines are revised as funding information is received, pending final board approval. The district budget committee, chaired by the superintendent and comprised of a senior leadership team and supported by the finance department staff, is responsible for the final budget recommendation presented to the board. Formal committee meetings begin in early February and continue on a regular basis until the budget is approved by the board. Everything comes together in one place in April, when the administration meets with the Board of Trustees in a general fund budget work session, presenting current revenue information and potential expenditure information under consideration. The material presented at work session is based on the most up-to-date legislative information, at that point, typically the House budget version. First reading of the general fund budget is the first formal board meeting where the administration presents a balanced budget based on strategic plan goals and priorities. By your policy, I am required to present you with a balanced budget in whole for your consideration. This meeting is scheduled to coincide with the most up-to-date legislative information available. Again, that material presented on current legislative information, which generally includes Senate information. Sometimes by this point, we have an agreed upon House and Senate version, but almost always a Senate and House version. The second formal board process is the public hearing and second reading of the general fund budget, when the administration once again presents a balanced budget based on strategic plan priorities. By statute, the public hearing is advertised in the newspaper at least 15 days in advance of the meeting. Doesn't matter that you have all these new forms of media. It has to be put in the local newspaper of record in print. It's important to note that while a formal public input session does not occur till the end of the process, all budgeting decisions are driven by the strategic ed plan, and it is throughout the strategic plan development process that we seek and utilize input from all stakeholders. And you've seen some of the reports of the thousands of people that includes in the strategic plan process. The strategic plan goals and strategies become the guidepost to the budget process. Board policy DCE requires 2 readings before ratification, the June 30 deadline for adoption of a balanced budget. Once approved, the budget department can finalize salary rates and schedules and upload dollar allocations for schools and departments. This is a substantial amount of work that must be accomplished in a very short time. Salary schedules and hourly rates must be calculated and uploaded in time for payroll to process and pay employees with new rates for the fiscal year beginning July 1. Non-teacher personnel who work in excess of 190 days, their new rate goes into effect July 1. So it requires some period of time between passage and July 1 to get that information loaded. That's why we generally ask that the budget be completed at least 2 weeks before the end of June. School and department dollar allocation is verified and uploaded. As I mentioned, in FY23, over 4,000 salaries and 18,000 budget lines were uploaded for our 180 schools and departments. That's to meet that first deadline. Obviously, by the time we bring the teacher salaries in, it's far more than that. We've got 11,000 total employees. During the year, expenditures are monitored against the budget with analysis presented in the form of financial reports that are prepared monthly for board members. Now, our staff in there literally tracks the budget on a daily basis in all of its aspects. I mentioned earlier in the process, if you go back in this, about new funding request. So just kind of to illustrate the significance of that. You see what ends up in your budget. You saw that in the work session, things we considered. You will see that today in the first reading. These are the requests. So every one of them is analyzed and determined whether or not we should include that in the recommendation we make for the budget. This doesn't include anything about teacher formula, formula allocations. These are budget requests to add this dollar for a particular item, initiative, or event, or activity. So it's an extremely thorough and extremely time-consuming process, as it should be. As we move past how we perform that, I believe you have in your appendix, Stephanie, a calendar, a budget calendar. It is not in the narrative where you lined out by month. It's at the end? Okay, so we'll come back to that. As we like to do, we want to go back to the strategic plan. And we want to go back to the things that have been accomplished through the budget process, because that's the whole basis of this budget, is to accomplish the goals set forth in the strategic plan. So as we reflect back on the accomplishments, we're ranked 13th overall among school districts in South Carolina on 21 key measures of academic attainment, moved up from 19th in 2012. Our students outperformed the state and the nation on the SAT and the ACT. Last year's senior class earned $183 million in scholarship offers. Obviously, that's an immediate return on this community's investment in education. We had 30 seniors named National Merit Scholarship semifinalists in 21-22. On most recent report card, 94% of our schools meet or exceed the criteria to meet the state's profile of South Carolina graduate. We exceed the state average in all key academic indicators, and the percent of graduates who are considered college and career ready on the 22 state report card. Our grad rate's up 13 points since 2012 to 85%. Now that's the district overall graduation rate. The rate for African American students increased 16 points, Hispanic, Latino 12 points, 17 points for students with limited English proficiency, and 26 points for students with disabilities since 2012. During the 21-22 school year, our students earned 8,745 industry certifications, a 41% increase over the previous year, and over 1,000% increase since 16-17. We also had 1,860 Career Center completers in 21-22, a 90% increase from the previous year. In 21-22, our students earned 25,050 potential college credit hours via AP and dual credit courses. That's a 56% increase from 16-17. If you value that out at the standard rate of tuition for a South Carolina public four-year college, last year's value of that was $10.5 million. Premier workforce. All the research indicates, that the single most effective means to increase student achievement is a quality teacher in the classroom. Second, a quality principal leading the school. We moved from 31st to our current ranking of 3rd in South Carolina average district teacher pay over 10 years. We moved from 22nd to 3rd in minimum South Carolina district teacher pay over that same 10 years. We were the first district, this board was the first board in the state to approve a $40,000 starting salary for teachers, now at $45,075. And there was, some of you will recall having seen this in the news, an immediate domino effect that other school districts within a year were raising their salaries significantly. We have 317 nationally board certified teachers. That's the highest in the state and the 12th highest in the nation. Our turnover rate, 12% compared to a state average this past year of 15%. We have traditionally had, in the last several years, one of the lowest turnover rates in the state. Our teacher salary schedule has 11 steps above the state schedule. All of those are 100% locally funded. You're recognizing our experienced teachers, your salary schedule. Current top pay for a teacher in Greenville County Schools this year is $97,356. If you have a doctorate, 34 years experience. Crest 100,000 with this recommended budget. 63.2% of our teachers have master's degree or higher. The average teacher in Greenville County Schools has 12.8 years of experience. Our GATE program has been extremely successful recruiting teachers in critical subject areas and expanding to more subject areas. We've also seen a great level of retention with teachers coming through that program. Caring culture and environment, the third goal in our strategic plan. We have a long-term funding process in place to maintain the best program investment, predominantly through the capital budget. But there are items in your general fund budget that also relate to that, particularly the funding of positions in our facilities department to carry out the routine daily maintenance of all of our facilities. The long-range facilities plan capital improvement program to meet future planned needs. It's updated annually. We're maintaining 12.8 million square feet of space and 3,000 acres of grounds. We have a technology refresh plan to keep our school technology updated. That's the one-to-one devices we have for every student and all the technology that our teachers and other personnel utilize to make their jobs function more efficiently and effectively. Safe and healthy environment, including the 52 school resource officers we have stationed in 46 schools, which are all middle and high schools and 4 elementary schools. 37 other locations have shared school resource officers. We still maintain zone patrol officers serving the remaining 14 schools and centers that do not have an assigned SRO, and 94 mental health counselors that serve GCS students assigned to all schools. We have 5 security specialists ensuring compliance with security best practices, updating emergency plans, conducting trainings, and ensuring that BTAM teams, behavior threat assessment teams, are in place and functioning as they are intended to function. So we have 3 officers and 3 technicians travel with our portable evolved weapon detection system throughout the school day and at entry to athletic and other events. Our finance department has received the best possible unmodified audit opinion on the external audit of our annual comprehensive financial report. We have the highest credit rating possible for South Carolina school districts. Our finance department has also been recognized with a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Governmental Finance Officers Association for 36 consecutive years. We received a Department of Energy Award for Best in Class in the following categories: HVAC inspection and maintenance for indoor air quality and efficient HVAC for indoor environmental quality. We maintain a low administrative cost, the lowest cost in the state of South Carolina, of less than a penny for every dollar spent. Our budgeted utility cost has remained stable since 2008. Community engagement and communications, you see the number of page views to our website, 33.7 million. 76% of our Facebook posts reach 10,000 or more people, 20,000 Twitter followers, 26,800 Instagram followers. See some of our employee recognition programs, Teacher of the Year, Employees of the Year, Employee Spotlight, Retirement, and other programs. Know that we use an upbeat survey instrument to survey our principals regarding all aspects of district operations and our teachers regarding how their school functions. Our upbeat survey indicates that our principals are 97% satisfied with communication supports. Provide ongoing assistance with parent and staff messages for written and audio channels, English and Spanish. Our website is continually monitored and improved to ensure that we're ADA compliant. We have ongoing media relations to share positive school news stories. You know, we often get asked about national comparisons. There's not like this, although every state gives tests. The tests vary from state to state. Every state has a graduation rate. How that's calculated varies from state to state. It's based on different numbers of units. It's based on some states, we don't in South Carolina, that may have some credential or occupational credential that counts as a graduate with a diploma. So it's not a level comparison. There's only one source out there that appears to rate not only individual schools, but all school districts. And a lot of realtors use this, and a lot of families that are considering a move to a location use this, and that's niche. And I'm sure you all have probably looked at it. So if you want to look at how you compare to others within its ability to do so, and it looks at a variety of data, and you can go online and look at their website and it'll share that with you, having to do with test scores and satisfaction. There's a number of factors. But it's really the only thing where there is an equivalent measure applied to all the school districts that they survey. Now, there's about 14,000. They only are assessing 12,261. I don't know why there's a difference in the two numbers. We don't know why. But in South Carolina, we're one of 18 school districts. We have an A-. We're one of 18 school districts with an A. In the United States, we're one of 1,998 school districts. There's 16% of the public school districts in the country, which would include public charter school districts. There are 16% that have an A. Our school district has an A, A-. Would have an A grade of A+. They do A+, A-, and A, and they do that in all the categories. So that gives some view, and it reinforces a point that unfortunately we've had to make before. There are two very different systems of education in the state of South Carolina. We're fortunate that we are in an area. We're fortunate that we have a board that supports quality system. We're fortunate we're in a community that supports a quality system, and not only supports it through its actions and its approval of budgets that do that, but that has a community that has the financial ability to support a quality system. So that's just something I wanted to share with you. I don't know if you've seen that before. You may have seen our grade, but I don't know that you've ever seen it in light of the grades that are cast or assessed to other districts. Talked a little bit about where we spend our money. The year we're in, we're spending excuse me, right at $0.8 million on salaries and benefits. And we spend $65.5 million on others. There's the salaries. There's a reason the people seem to disappear based on their size. Because you see under them the amount we spend. 63.9% is spent on teachers and aides, 11.2% on instructional support, 10.1% on operations at the school level. Think about personnel such as custodians, that sort of thing assigned to school. School level administration, 5.7%. Principals, assistant principals, athletic directors, those kinds of people. I'm sorry, principals, assistant principals, AAs, not athletic directors. School clerical, obviously what that is, 2.4%. District employees, that's all the other employees. That's all the maintenance people, that's all the clerical people, that's all the people in this room that work at the district level that provide service and support. District director and above, those are the actual leadership personnel in the district. That is 1.3%. There are about, I believe, 50 of those people. That includes me and everyone that, all those people you see against the wall, the people that lead director level and above. If you break down the non-salaried expense, you've seen this chart before, it will show you in that chart how they're broken down. And obviously the biggest section in there are fixed costs. Utilities, liability tort insurance, annual software maintenance contracts, and other contracts. And you see an explanation of all of those breakouts. I won't read all of them. All right, put a finer point on the investment that you all have made over the last 10 years. We've added 10 steps to the teacher salary schedule, recognizing the value of our most experienced teacher. You all have taken actions that increase the base teacher salary schedule in 10 years from $33,259 to $45,075. We've gone from number 31 to number 3 in teacher scheduled average pay, reduced student-teacher ratios across all grades. And every time you move that by 1, it costs over $13 million. You move it by 1. Increased academic and athletic supplements for those individuals investing significant after-hours time in coaching and directing student activities and events. Increase the entry-level wages, the entry-level being our least paying jobs, over a 3-year period from $10.26 an hour to $15.06 an hour, a 46.8% increase over 3 years. In order that we recognize the value and the importance of those positions, and also to be competitive in the local marketplace. I doubt you would go through Greenville or go out on social media about jobs in Greenville, and at a job you would look at that would be entry level with low skill required entry level, you're really not going to find anybody hiring at less than $15 an hour. That's what the market's having to pay, and individuals are still finding that they cannot fill their positions. Ensured elementary teacher daily planning time. Our GATE program that you all have approved has increased 600% first 6 years. Full-time athletic director at every high school. They're managing huge numbers of, and leading huge numbers of coaches, teams, and coordinating activities and schedules. Approved a flex allocation so that principals have the ability to utilize at least a fraction, 3/4 of a position or more, depending on the size of the school, totally at their discretion, to best meet the instructional needs in their school and their community. An employee assistance program to provide assistance to our employees that may find themselves in need of some sort of counseling or other services that are beyond the scope of their health insurance coverage. Open 3 new school centers and increase student capacity at 7 other locations. Maintain teachers when state funding ended for reduced class size and gifted programs. Maintain teachers and aides when state funded ended for multilingual learners. Decrease the multilingual student to teacher ratio from 138 to 1 to 80 to 1. Established elementary reading interventionist positions to work with our students that are most struggling with learning to read. And you've expanded that over time to meet the data-driven needs, i.e. the number of students they have that are not performing up to expectation based on their annual assessment in ELA. Relocated special education classes to home-based schools. Added ongoing funding for band and strings instruments. Provided additional assistant director supplements for instrumental music based on the number of participants. Decreased school counselor ratio at middle and high schools from 350 to 1 to 250 to 1. Increase the base clerical support for all schools. Establish a security zone patrol. Targeted increases, and we talked about one of them earlier. There have been others, and there's one included in there are 2 included in your budget this year. Targeted increases for employee work groups with critical shortages. Added interventionists, before and after school tutoring, credit recovery labs, expanded summer school, and more to mitigate pandemic learning gaps. Added an evolved system, personnel to operate. Expanded the ARMS program from 1 to 3 sites, increasing the program enrollment by 46%, providing that opportunity to 162 more students. As I mentioned to you earlier, the funding formula has changed, but it's changed in budget proviso. It was changed for this year, it's changed for next year. The new model funds education based on a statewide average student-teacher ratio that doesn't take into account the need to employ personnel such as principals, assistant principals, clerks, custodians, maintenance employees, or any other worker outside of the positions listed there. Classroom teacher, special ed, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten. Interestingly, many special ed classes require an aide being present, and the state requires you to have an aide in pre-K and kindergarten. They're not included in the funding. Retired teachers, library media specialists, librarians, guidance counselors, speech therapists, ROTC instructors, school nurses, occupational physical therapists, orientation and mobility instructors, audiologists, social workers, and psychologists. Now that seems like a fairly long list, but not when you think about all the personnel that it takes to run a school and operate a school district. The student-teacher ratio in the FY24 House budget is 11.2 to 1 statewide. The way they derive that is they take all those positions up there and they determine what the ratio of those people are to the number of students in the state of South Carolina, and they determine that it ought to be 11.2 to 1, because that's the average. And again, that determines, that 11.2 to 1 determines how much money we get, weighted by our weighted pupil unit. So there's an add for that. The average cost of a teacher. So you use the number to determine the average number. The average cost is that of an average teacher on the state salary schedule. The average teacher on the state salary schedule has a master's degree and 12 years of experience. They make $72,991. In a minute, we'll look at what we pay that person. Weightings then determine each district's share of the total funding. The formula includes a theoretical 75-25 local funding ratio. However, each district receives its share of the state total funds based on its proportion of the total weighted pupils and the district's ability to pay as measured by the index of tax-paying ability. Our current ratio is 78-22 hours. They're the weightings. So for every student, we get 1. The column to the left shows what the weighting was under EFA. The weighting to the right shows what it is now. All right, pre-career and CTE. Under EFA, we got 1.29. We now get 1.2. Special ed ranged from 1.74 to 2.57. We now get 2.6. All right, those two categories of students are the most expensive students to educate in our system. Those who receive special education services and our students who are in career and technical courses. So you see in career and technical, they dropped that weighting. So we lost a 0.09 for those students. We picked up slightly in special education services. Neither of which approach what it costs to provide the kind of education that we need and desire to provide to those students. Gifted and talented, you see it remains at 0.15, academic assistance 0.15, limited English proficiency 0.2, pupils in poverty had a significant increase from 0.2 to 0.5. That is the single greatest indicator of a student's ability, barriers to their ability to learn is whether or not they're a pupil in poverty. So it's certainly good that it recognizes the additional challenges of providing educational students to services to students in poverty. Dual enrollment went from 0.15 to 0. What have we constantly been doing with our dual enrollment? We've been increasing the numbers. So we're getting a 1.0 for them. State budget line items moved to the new funding model. This year, state aid to classrooms, EIA teacher salary supplements, EIA employer contributions, EIA students at risk of school failure, and EIA aid to districts. All those were moved. For the coming year, student health and fitness, student health and fitness nurses, and EEDA career specialists, which we utilize to partially fund counselors. One of the things to note about that, not necessarily in every case, but predominantly, when you see something in EIA, that's moving from 100% funding now to a formula that's 70, 75, 25, or for us, 78, 22. All right, so the dollar we used to get became 78 cents. All right, remember we shared with you a few slides back the average teacher pay. We told you that this system was based on that average pay in the state. And so you see in the left column the state, masters and 12 years experience. That's 52,604. All right. We're currently paying that same teacher 58,154. If you look at a proposed increase of 2,500 on the state salary, you see that that takes the proposed salary to 55,104 with a fringe cost of 17,887, added fringe cost of 17,887. Total average 72,991. If we add the same $2,500, our salary goes for that teacher to $80,000 a year. Certainly a good salary. We're very supportive of that level, and certainly we have recommended in our budget, first reading, $2,500 increase. The difference, if that's approved, is $7,351. We can't compete for teachers at the state minimum salary schedule. And in fact, once we establish a salary higher than that, we are required to maintain that higher salary from one year to the next. You see a reminder down there of the positions that are included and not included. The number of employees we have paid on the teacher salary schedule is 5,909. They're going to go into a little more detail about this, but just in summary, the main points of the recommended 24 budget: increase for nurse, OT, and PT salary schedules, a flat increase to every cell on their salary schedule, because we are not competitive in that arena, and we're not able to attract people, and it has one of the highest turnover rates in the district. The nurse nurse salary schedule. OT, PT, we have some personnel in those roles that were grandfathered in. If you hire someone now in that role, it requires a doctorate, and we are not paying commensurate with that requirement, hence the recommendation. Continue to address internal salary inequities for district level employees, adjustment for assistant administrator pay for small elementary schools. That'll be a little more self-explanatory in a few minutes. Personnel for growth to meet the estimated increase of 1,073 students. Funding to meet the required employer contribution for health insurance and retirement. Funding to further enhance school security. Increased support for students with disabilities and multilingual learners. Staffing to open the CTE Innovation Center. The staffing to support the third-year rollout of Fountain Inn. Adding 2 roofers and maintenance. Funding for increased cost in supply and service contracts. To replace lost special revenue funds to continue the positions we were paying from those funds. Paid parental leave. And most important, though not specifically listed, is the proposed salary increase for our teachers, step and $2,500, and the salary increase for all other employees of 3%. If you look at the increase in state revenue, that's the increase we project for state revenue. That's a huge increase, $40.9 million. Now look at the next box. If we maintain everything we currently have, maintain what we currently have, so that replaces any funding we lost by conversion in that formula, just maintain what we have, same pupil-teacher ratio, all of that. And we meet the state mandated cost increase. So the only salary increase in there would be a teacher step, which is required by the state, And that ranges anywhere from 0.5% to over 3%, just a step, and a bus driver step. What we would be required to do, and what we'd have to do to just maintain what we got, is $36.3 million. To do that, to maintain that, and recommended improvements. Well, you saw the improvements, the large dollar ones have to do with salary increases. Those others are two maintenance roofers, less than $100,000 in a budget that we're talking about. It's salary increase for teachers, it's salary increase for other employees, and it's to meet the growth we have in our population. Growth is not recognized in the state funding. In fact, you could make an argument that if you're growing, you're penalized the state funding. That's a difference of $66 million. You'll see recommendation for a tax increase. So there are multiple examples in here. Here's how we derive the examples for a car. Is that everybody pays on their car for school operating purposes. You pay on your car, your boat, your truck, your motorcycle. If you have a trailer of a certain size, an airplane, you pay on that. You pay nothing for school operations on your home that you occupy. If you own it or you and the bank own it, you do not pay school operating taxes on that home. So for the majority of people in our county, what you pay for school operating purposes is assessed on your car. We take the three most popular cars that are purchased. The three most popular cars that are purchased in the United States. It's a Toyota Camry, a Ford F-150, and I don't remember what the third one is, but it's in your document. And we take the average age of cars that people in the United States own. The average age is a 2011. All right, so in 22, on your 2011, you paid $20.05. This year, including the tax increase that this body approved for the year we're in, you pay, with the tax increase, $19.20. So you've already figured out you pay less, even with that increase. Now, because of the increase this year that we're recommending, it would reflect a slight increase you'd pay. You pay 15 cents more. So for 24, you pay $19.35. You're paying $19.20. It's not a month, a year. Would go to $19.35. The way the tax code is written in South Carolina, just about any millage increase for this organization that's around 7 to 8 results in you paying less on your car next year than you paid this year. Because no matter how much your car went up in value, the state tax code prohibits it being assessed at more than 95% of this year's value. So even in the weird market that existed in the last couple of years, where used cars went up in value, you actually paid taxes on a lesser value because of that statute that says it'll be no more than 95% of what you paid the year before. Might not make sense, but that's kind of, that's the way it's written. So that certainly benefits the taxpayer. The other taxes that are paid by businesses. Now, we're not talking about the industry that has fee in lieu of taxes negotiated. That's a predetermined amount. We get revenue from that every year, and you'll see that in Robin's report when she describes the revenue. Get that every year, that's predetermined. These are small businesses. All right, so you could pay taxes on a machine, or you could pay taxes on the building. So, as would be the case with a car, unless you buy a new car or buy another car, you had two and you bought three, you're going to pay less taxes one year than the next. Or, in this case, marginally more, a few cents more. The same is true of business on the equipment side. Now, the business property, which would be their buildings, generally goes up in value, as does the home you live in. So they may experience an increase in that. But equipment they buy, whether that's a piece of machinery or a truck or a car, something like that, they also have the ability to depreciate that. But you're talking about two different sides of taxes. So it may or may not have the exact impact that you calculate. In the presentation, you'll see a calculation for local businesses. I believe you all have three in there as an example, three that we've used for a number of years: drugstore, machine shop, and a flower shop. I'm not sure where they got the decision to do one of those, but they did one of those. But those businesses, while they may realize the full impact on their building, they likely won't on their equipment, and they have the ability to depreciate the building on the other taxes they pay. But we can't really estimate that for you because that's going to depend business to business, and it's going to depend on what type depreciation they took. Well, they took a step down depreciation, or they took a depreciation where basically they're taking 90%. They're taking all of it the first year. You can do both. You can step it down over time, or you can take 90% the first year. But you can depreciate business equipment property down to 10% of its value. Isn't that right, Robin? So that's sort of a kind of a broad base look at that. And here you see an office building over 39 years, straight line depreciation that costs $500,000. You could depreciate it $12,820 over 39 years if you wanted to, or you could depreciate it in the first year to down to 10%. Budget summary. This recognizes the importance of teaching and non-teaching employees through pay increases to maintain our competitive status. It meets all mandates. It maintains all current staffing levels and provides improvement to special ed, multilingual learners, and CTE. It addresses growth in student numbers. It provides some, now not an adjustment equal to the rate of inflation, but some adjustment for inflation in the cost of services and supplies. It enhances student and employee safety and security. That's a calendar summary of what we talked about in the narrative early on, of what it looks like month by month. You may want to look through that later on. It just simply lays it out in a calendar format. So that concludes the overview of the budget process, and now we will move into the revenue section, and Ms. Stack will lead that presentation. Robin?
Thank you, Dr. Royster, and good morning, all. The first category that has changed since the work session is our property tax amount. If you will refer to page 3 in your packet, based on tax collections through March, we have revised the mill value, which results in an additional $2,364,000 for a total projected FY24 property tax revenue of $244,444,000. So for the workshop information, we had already received the millage increase information from the South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office. Based on the CPI of 8% and the Greenville County population increase of 2.9%, The millage increase limitation is 10.96%, which correlates to 16.1 mills. The administration is proposing an operational millage increase of 9 mills for FY24 in order to meet the needs associated with growth and inflation. This increase will use 5.2 mills from FY21 and 3.8 mills from FY22. This look back is provided through state law where school boards can use millage from the previous 3 years, and if they do not, that mill will lapse. So for FY24, that millage was 5.2 mills from FY21. And with this tax increase, that will be used and we will not lose it. On page 4, as Dr. Royster referred to this, we've given you examples of how the 9 mill increase will affect we've chosen 4, as we have in the past, businesses around the county, a restaurant, a machine shop, a pharmacy, and a flower shop. Based on each business's assessed value, the property tax estimate ranges from $146.19 annually to $407.08 annually. Also, we've provided examples of the vehicles that are most common on our roads today. The Toyota Camry, the 9 mil increase will affect the Camry of 15 cents more a year. A Nissan Altima is the other car, is 16 cents per year, and the Ford F-150 is 62 cents per year. Now, if we take those 3 vehicles and look at it as if they were purchased new, then a Toyota Camry would experience a $16.34 increase, a Nissan Altima, $16.35 increase, and a Ford F-150 of $22.57 increase. Page 5, we have a change to our school bus driver salary workers' compensation revenue. We have received inconsistent information from the State Department in this area, and we've requested clarification. Until we get that information, we have reduced our projected revenue by $665,000. And finally, the use of fund balance. We have increased it by $1 million to balance revenues and expenditures in the FY24 budget. That concludes the updates for the revenue section.
Short cord on the mic. Good morning. Sorry, thank you. Expenditure section starts on page 7, and I'd like to briefly just go over some items. Expenditures are organized again by state mandate section first, and then our local priorities towards our strategic ed plan goals. So under state mandates, under a premier workforce, the first item is our teacher salary step. That's for all of our current teachers to receive salary step for their year experience. The next is teacher certificate upgrades, and as our teachers earn additional degrees or certificate upgrades during the year, this is a projection to fund that amount for next year. The next 2 items are health increases. One is for the last part of calendar 23, and the next is for the first part of calendar 24, the 18.1% and the 3.7% for both of those years, 6 months each year. The next item is the state retirement employer contribution rate increase. In 2017, there was a Retirement System Funding and Administrative Act that year that had an additional 1% increase for 6 years annually for retirement for state employees. This is the final 1% according to that act, and that's that 4.8 million. On page 8, we have a change from work session, the bus driver state mandated increase to salary schedule. In work session, we presented the information we had from the House was a 20% increase. We now have a 25% increase. That equates to a $2.28 per hour increase for all of our bus drivers. Our top pay is currently 58.5% higher than the state's highest amount. And with this additional $2.28 per hour, our new top rate will be $23.54. The next item is also new, paid parental leave. This was the bill that originated in the House, and there's been some recent developments on that as well. But our estimation, based on what we know at this time, is that cost will be approximately $1.496 million.
Good morning. Under Goal 1, just reviewing the items from work session, the increase associated with student growth of 1.7 million is associated with the 1,073 additional students as projected by our Planning and Demographics Department for next year. Fountain High School, adding grade 11 will add 24 FTEs to their baselines for a total of 2,121,000. Our CTE Innovation Center, which opened in August of 23. The 7.0 FTEs includes program director, a school counselor, and 5.0 teaching allocations for $710,000. Teachers for multilingual learners are 7.0 FTE. For $615,000, this funding will increase our FTEs to 7, in addition to what we have now, in order to maintain our ratio of 80-1, which was approved by the board a few years ago. The teachers for multilingual learners on page 9 at the top, this impacts 4 schools to lower their ratio to a ratio of 50-1 for a total of 13 FTEs. This will cost $1.1 million. And this was for the schools that have 50% or more of students with MLs in their population. Our special education teachers, the 10.0 FTEs for $879,000. This is just, again, due to the district's increasing enrollment. As we increase across the board, our special education numbers also increase as the numbers of students with disability grows. Our speech language therapists, 1.0 FTE for $89,000. This addition of the 1.0 FTE speech therapists will reduce the average caseload below 60-1 and will increase the level of service provided to our students with disabilities. The occupational therapist for 1.0. The average caseload for a GCS occupational therapist currently has risen from 56 to 1 in 2022 to 59 to 1 in 2023. The addition of the 1.0 will reduce the caseload to 57 to 1 and increase the level of service provided to students with disabilities. The transition coordinator, the 1.0 FTE, currently 4,889 of our students are required to receive our post-secondary transition special ed services, which is approximately 1/3 of the students served through special education in the district. Establishing this transition coordinator position is vital to ensuring that Graduation Plus is attainable and accessible for our students with disabilities. The 2.0 FTE school psychologists for $189,000. The addition of the 2.0 FTEs will reduce the district's student to psychologist ratio from 2,176 to 1 to 2,062 to 1. This will increase the capabilities to meet students' behavior, social, emotional, and academic needs through the referral and evaluation process. Our mentoring for our first-year teachers. The current mentor stipend is $250. This item funds a $750 increase per mentor to bring the overall stipend per mentor to $1,000. The GCS mentors, as you know, spend approximately 39 hours mentoring and coaching our first-year teachers so they can have a successful year. This increase would help recognize the work they put in each year to ensure that our first-year teachers are successful. The Greenville Alternative Teacher Education, or GATE program. This request supports current services and increases the capacity by an additional 20 seats for a cohort maximum of 90 to accommodate an increased need in all of our content areas. The increased support for special education and expansion of the program to include elementary and early childhood teachers. In FY24, the program is projected to serve 160 teachers. The single sign-on software ClassLink, this software simplifies our access, analytics, and identity management with one platform and uses a secure multi-factor authentication method. Our 4-year-old kindergarten teachers and aides, this is 7 classes or 14 FTEs. The 4-year-old's kindergarten special revenue funding can no longer support salary and fringe benefit expenditures for teachers and aides who are paid out of this funding source. This this is to be moved to general fund. Special revenue nurses, school counselors, PE teachers, 73.5. The state has adopted a new education funding model that moves certain special revenue funds into the general fund. Funds eliminated and amounts transferred to the new funding formula. In this case, move 73.5 FTE positions from these special revenue funds to the general fund. Our career certifications, over the last 6 years, the district has dramatically increased the number of industry certifications from 601 to 8,745 for this past school year. General fund money has been used to supplement the state funding that we receive. GCS anticipates continued growth as we increase student certification and as South Carolina transitions to a new stackable tiered certification system.
Next item at the top of page 12 under Premier Workforce is the teacher salary schedule increase. This is the change from work session. We're now proposing a $2,500 increase to all cells on the teacher salary schedule. That will make our entry level salary for a teacher with a bachelor's 0 degree $47,636. This will make the average increase 5.49% for a step value. If we add step 35 with that $2,500, a teacher with 35 years experience and a doctorate will make $100,847. The next item is an increase for international teacher fees, as we still have an ongoing teacher shortage, especially in critical needs areas. We have an increased need for the funding for the fees associated with international teachers.
As mentioned earlier, with the opening of the CT Innovation Center, the support staff, the 4.5, provides clerical support staff and custodians to maintain the building and grounds.
The next item is bus driver compensation for years of experience. As our bus driver schedule has ranges when someone meets a year experience level to move to the next level, that's $136,000 cost for all of our bus drivers moving up one step. The next item is a $2,000 annual salary increase for our nurses, physical therapist, and occupational therapist, and that is to help us for increased retention and improve recruitment for those positions. At the top of page 13 is our non-teacher salary schedule. Step movement to a minimum 3% is what our recommendation is, and what this is for employees who are not on the teacher salary schedule, they would get a step. If that step was less than 3%, the value would be increased so that their step movement was at least 3%. If it is more, they would get whatever their step value equals. And that is a $5.757 million cost. The next item is our adjusting salary equity from missed steps, and that is $1.374 million. That's a continuation of, this is a partial continuation of what we partially implemented in the current year's budget. The next item is brand new. It was not presented in work session, and this is small elementary school administrator salary schedule change. Under the current formula, if an elementary school has 600 or less student population, they do not have an AP as an allocation, they have an AA, an administrative assistant. This is the cost to change those positions from AAs with an additional 15 days to a 205-day assistant principal, the same as all other elementary schools.
All right, good morning. Under Goal 3, Caring, Culture, and Environment, on page 14, the first item is athletic trainers. Due to a change in policy by Prisma Health, it will no longer provide athletic trainers to Greenville County Schools free of charge. Beginning next year, they'll be charging us $10,000 per athletic trainer. We currently have 15 athletic trainers on staff, which equates to the $150,000. The next item, maintenance facilities roofers, 2.0 FTE. Due to the number of roof-related work orders and lengthy response times from outside contractors, we're requesting 2.0 FTE for roofing specialists. The roofing specialists, we currently average about 845 work orders a year with roof-related repairs and roof leaks. So these two FTEs will not only provide maintenance for roof repairs, but they'll also perform preventive maintenance of roof drains and gutters and provide roof inspections. And that cost is $164,000. The next item is cost increases for existing services and supply contracts. The prices of materials, supplies, and services continue to increase due to inflation. This amount of $776,000 represents increases to school maintenance and support budgets in building services, maintenance, security, grounds, and ETS departments for existing contracts and materials. The next item is an increase in instructional materials. Again, the price of goods continue to rise due to inflation. And this is the cost for an increase in funding for instructional materials for schools and career centers. This amount will increase material allocations by 8% in schools and 15% for career centers. And that cost is $443,000. The next item is security enhancements. This request is for staffing for the operation of 2 additional evolved weapon detection units. And that's in addition to the 3 that we currently have. Each unit will be staffed with an assigned technician and accompanied by an off-duty sheriff's deputy. This additional 2 systems will provide more flexibility to conduct scans simultaneously at multiple schools and give us greater frequency and increased randomness. They'll also allow us to service more of our athletic and extracurricular events.
And the final page, page 15, we are estimating an increase for property and liability insurance premiums of $746,000. And then we are recognizing 1 reduction of expenditures, and that is based on the new funding formula, state aid to classrooms, that we have received. That Langston charter will have a reduction of funding of $620,000, so we are able to recognize that as a reduction. And you may have noticed throughout that there's some blue type in the document, and I should have said that at the beginning and I didn't. The blue type are changes. It's to try to help you to identify changes from what was presented at work session. So if an entire item is blue, it's brand new. The parts that have changed, you may have noticed just some of the dollars changed, and just the dollar is blue. That's where it had personnel, and it would have changed from the 2.5% non-teacher, 1850 teacher, to the now 3% recommended, 2,500 recommended for teachers. So just wanted to make it easier for you.
That concludes our presentation, Ms. Bush.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions from board members? Yes, Ms. Doolin.
Thank you. Thank you for going over all of this again so thoroughly. Dr. Royster, when you talk about our reliance on fund balance for reoccurring costs, this current school year, it was 13.5 million, and it somehow relates to our credit rating, which needs to remain an A. Is the reliance on fund balance a dollar amount or a percentage?
Well, you can convert it to a percentage. We have it expressed as a dollar amount. We started out with 20, how much, Robin?
0.6.
21.6 reliance. When we made that recommendation several years ago, we also said at that time it would be our intent to step it down to 0 in a 5-year period. We're a little bit ahead of that. We have further reduced our reliance by 5 in this budget. So you can convert that to a percentage. The issue is there are two things with it. You mentioned one of them. One is credit rating. If you continually rely on fund balance, non-recurring dollars to fund recurring cost, raters do not look at that favorably. If our bond rating is reduced, we go to sell bonds, which we do every year to pay capital projects. It will increase our cost, ultimately resulting in a cost increase to the taxpayer or us being able to not fund the projects that we have scheduled. The other issue is it's just bad business practice to, over a period of time, rely on non-recurring revenue to fund recurring cost. And just about every cost in our general fund budget is recurring. The only way you save in that budget as far as reducing recurring costs is to change staffing formulas because it's so heavily driven by personnel. The other thing that's I think important to be mindful of in looking at reliance on fund balance, we have had unusually high fund balance contributions in the last several years, primarily because of the infusion of ESSER funding, where we were able to journal entry expenses that were already in our general fund budget, offset those expenses with ESSER revenue because they were expenditures that were approved to be made under ESSER, thereby creating greater revenue over expense at the end of the fiscal year for the last 3 years and going into the 4th year. That will disappear in FY24. Ordinarily, we would finish a year with a budget that's somewhere between 98 and 99% expended. You really don't really want to be over 99%. There's too much opportunity that you'll run in the red if you go over 99%. Because we have a number of people that are expending in the budget throughout the year, all the way up to the very end of the fiscal year. So good business practice would be for a school district or other public entity to be expending 98 to 99% of your general fund budget, your recurring budget dollars. And that would be typical for us unless we have some real dramatic increase in revenue. But that huge infusion of revenue has been with us journal entering ESSER funds to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. Primarily that you all have approved for funding construction, which allowed us to pull projects up to do them sooner to offset the rapid growth that we're seeing in our community.
So to maintain our current credit rating, is there an exact percentage of fund balance that can be used, or is it a dollar amount?
There is neither. What raters would look at is what did you say you were going to do, and did you do that? So if we said we're going to end that reliance over 5 years, do we end it in 5 years? Number one, did we plan for it? All right, it was planned for and it was included in the budget. Number two, did you follow your plan? Did you either meet or exceed your planned end of your reliance on it? The other thing that will happen, whether it's expressed as a dollar amount or a percent. If you begin to rely on fund balance to fund ongoing recurring cost, you will hit a hole that you cannot fill by any means other than incredible tax increase and reducing personnel. There's a number that we gave a number 3 years ago, that we felt very comfortable we could end the reliance over a 5-year period, and that we believed, based on the condition of the economy at the time, that we would have no problem ending our dependence on it. The thing need to be considered at this point is we know the fund balance will not continue to grow at the rate that it's growing. We know we're already dependent to a degree on using fund balance. And we know with almost certainty, but not having a date or time, the economy will revert. We're going to hit a cliff on the economy. When you hit a cliff on the economy, I alluded to it earlier, in a 2-year period, we cut $70-some-odd million out of our budget. One of the first things we did to reduce the impact so that we could handle it through attrition, not by firing people, was we relied on fund balance partially to get us through the first year, which allowed us to buy sufficient time that, because again, the big money is in personnel. So to get that kind of savings, we cut out everything outside of that, but that didn't get you much money. But it gave us time to do it through attrition, so people didn't they might have lost the job they had, but they didn't lose a job. So you have to be extremely cautious in utilizing fund balance to pay for recurring costs. And at this point, we would absolutely not recommend using any more fund balance to offset the general fund budget. Mm-hmm. Yes, any personnel cost calculated in the budget includes a fringe benefit based on the average cost of a person in that position, and average benefit package.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate that. And then on page 12, I wanted to say that I'm very pleased that we're considering adding a 35th step to the teacher scale, because I think that it's really important that we recognize the experience of our teachers. Many teachers who are at that point in their career, they're at the height and they're very successful. So I think that that was a wise decision, and I support that totally. The next comment that I wanted to make was on page 13, eliminating the administrative assistant title. I would like to say that I also fully support that. Administrative assistants very much deserve the title of assistant principal. I understand there's a difference between the very small schools, and I like the fact that we're doing a tier approach and taking away that title, because I think that encourages leadership for the future. I think that's going to inspire those who've had the administrative assistant title. It's going to be an inspiration to them to now be called assistant principal, to be given the title that they deserve, because they are fulfilling that work. So those are my only comments. I just wanted to say thank you for the inclusion of those items and to get clarification. Oh, wait, one other final thing. You mentioned the beginning pay for a teacher. You said 47,000 something. Can you give me that exact number? Because I would really like to know what that is, because I've been looking at some other districts and what their starting salary is. I'd like to know what that would be specifically.
$47,636.
Thank you very much.
As a follow-up, thank you for your comments, Dr. Stiles, but as a follow-up, one just to make sure, because there's a line in here that might get lost. At a school where they have multiple assistants, we would still have some of those that would be administrative assistants. But this would be at the schools where there is a single assistant. Wanted to clarify that, because it kind of gets lost in the narrative. The other issue, as apparently you have as well, we try to track what others are doing, both in asking them and then reading the news commentary. And so it would seem the ones that we're most interested in what they're doing, which are the ones that are either closest to us or what they indicate they might do would put them close to or past us. We're seeing, at least right now, a lot of $2,500 increases. We're seeing several at $3,000, and then there was one that came to our attention yesterday of $4,000. And the $4,000 one would put that district right within dollars of us, maybe a few dollars above, perhaps a few dollars less. But as time, and what happens as time goes on in the spring, you can find out more and more from other districts what they intend to do. Because for some, they're very guarded about what they intend to do, because they'd like to be able to do that and their nearest competitors not realize till the last minute what they're doing. So, and to a degree, we're the same way, because we're all, particularly in the upstate, we're all competing for kind of the same pool of people. And now it's statewide and regionally, we're competing for the same pool of people. And, you know, there were two reasons to come back. We gave you a number 1850. One, we wanted to have some better revenue numbers to see what might offset a bigger increase. But the other is, the more we find out, for us to be competitive, we needed to be at 2,500. It'd be nice to be higher than that. We looked at, and Stephanie can tell you the cost of that. It was a pretty considerable cost. We looked at what the cost would be to go to 50,000. And it did two things. It had a cost, Stephanie, of, while she looks, the other effect it had in addition to the total cost, because the cheapest way to, I shouldn't say the cheapest, the least expensive way to do it is to compress the first steps, which is what we did to get to 45. But it would mean compressing all the way up to step 8, and it cost.
Additional $2.5 million.
But it compressed every step up to 8. Now, again, if you were on step 8, you were certainly making more than you made on step 7 or 6 or 5 or 4, but it would basically put everybody on the first 8 steps on the same salary schedule.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I think it's very, very important as a board that we ensure that we're competitive in our salaries for teachers, because we do want to draw the best and brightest. That has everything to do with our success for the future. I personally feel very strongly about that. Thank you, Dr. Royster.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. I think Dr. Royster just answered my question. I was going to ask, with this new teacher recommendation or this new increase, where that put us. And hearing you say we're not quite sure, but we.
No, it should keep us above 10, should keep us above 6 or 7, but it's too early to know. And then some of what people have said they're going to do, that may not come to fruition. And there are others out there we still not real sure what they're going to do.
Okay, so, and we're number 3 now?
We're number
heading into this
3
year?
right now.
Okay.
We know we would not, Beaufort's number 1. We already know based on what they are planning to do, we'll not catch number 1.
Okay.
They're going to end up being, depending on how you look at it, at 52 or 3,000 for beginning teacher. They had money, they were providing teachers a housing allowance of a certain amount. They started doing that several years ago. They have over time converted that to salary dollars. Then they've added money to it. They'll probably be 51 or 52. Okay. And then what we're hearing, the ones kind of around us, they're looking at numbers real similar to what we're looking at. But now one of them yesterday that was not close to us, but $4,000 will put them right at us. Okay. The others seem to be looking at numbers that would keep us relatively in the same position, or we might shift. And you know, when you start looking at the top, if you kind of take Beaufort out of it, if you start looking at the top, you'll see like a few $100 difference. And when you get out of probably the top 10, then you get a more significant difference. Where's it jumped significantly, Stephanie? You've got that appendix, I think.
There's really a break between the 43s, and then when you hit there's a bunch at 42,940. So it's really probably the top 10, 12.
Okay.
And then they begin to spread out all the way down to, I guess, the lowest, the minimum right now, the minimum in 23 is 40, right?
It's 40, that's correct.
The state moves it to 42.5.
Well, I appreciate that. I tend to echo Dr. Stiles' sentiments of how important it is that we stay competitive with that and attract the best and the brightest. Just a point of clarification, just make sure I understood. On the other increase, the 3% minimum, that unless they're due more, it's either or, like, it's either 3% if they're due less, minimum is 3, is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, correct.
You know,
But if they're due more, they'll get whatever they're due.
If their step value is 4,
Uh-huh.
they would get 4.
Okay,
the steps for non-teaching personnel equally as confusingly constructed as teachers, but just not as bad. There's not as jumping up and down difference, but there's some of the steps, they're unequal. So the way that's written, you'd be guaranteed 3%. So if your step was 2.5, you can get 3%.
okay,
If your step 6, you're gonna get 6. If you're off the scale and you wouldn't get anything, you'll get 3.
okay. Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Bush.
Question for, on page 10. Yeah, can you hear it?
Hold it a little closer.
Okay. On page 10, I was just wondering, some of these schools have these trails that run behind them, like Fountain Inn, and there are children, students that are walking those trails to get to school. Do we have any security cameras or anything like that? The reason I ask is because there was a nurse that asked me about that her daughter goes to Fountain Inn, and she does not want her daughter walking those trails because of all the things that happen on Swamp Rabbit and so forth. So it's a safety precaution there. And the kids seem to be walking, and then if they set a pattern, well, we know what happens sometimes. And so she's concerned about the safety of her.
Our cameras would not pick them up till they come on the school property.
Yep.
But we can tell you either in executive session or send it to you in executive content about how far that is. We wouldn't want to say that publicly.
Okay.
We would have no cameras on those trails. Those trails belong to, and I guess in that case, it's maintained by the city of Fountain Inn. Some of it's maintained by the county. Some of it's maintained by the municipalities it passes through.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I told her I would check on that. So, and then let's see, on page 20. So is Langston Charter our only charter school now?
Langston Charter is the only school that remains chartered through the district and has been for a number of years.
And they would make more money if they joined the state. Is that correct or not correct?
Well, we have asked for a specific calculation.
Uh-huh.
There has been no other charter school that ever left that did not benefit financially by going to the state charter district.
Right.
But they've had some changes to their funding. And one of the reasons theirs went down was the new funding formula, because we are required to fund them utilizing the funding formulas by which we get our money.
Right.
So you take some of those, you remove some of those weightings, or you don't have students in the weightings that were increased, cause you to lose money. We believe they would still financially benefit by going to state charter district, and we have requested, and I believe the finance person at the state charter district indicated that by Monday, he would have a precise calculation sent to them and to us.
Okay.
But we've talked with them numerous times over the years about the financial benefit, because it was very clear in the older funding formula, every charter school that left us benefited significantly financially, and our schools that remained benefited significantly financially when they left and went to state charter district.
Right. And I did hear from a couple of charters that said they wish they'd have never lost the district because the district helped them in so many other ways. But financially, you're right.
Yeah, financially, we certainly could not
right?
provide for them what they're receiving through the state charter district.
Correct. And Robin, of course, you know I'm going to ask that car question because I've asked Jeff every year I've been on this board. And so when we talk about the tax increase, these are reoccurring taxes, increases on those taxes for those cars, correct? Yeah. So just like when we do the millage increase, it's reoccurring.
Yes,
So,
But it's ever diminishing.
ever diminishing, yes.
because the number of whatever the year is of the car, it depreciates.
Yes.
Generally speaking, with the tax increases that you all have generally approved over the years, the first year you paid less than you paid the last year. And certainly every year following that, you pay even less. And that would be true even if it's one where you're paying a little bit more. Next year, I mean, you can go ahead and calculate it. It would be no more than 95% of that increase. So the increase on that Toyota was how much?
16 cents, something.
16 cents.
15 cents.
I have the wrong car.
So 15, next year it would be a penny less next year. Now that's for the year. It's 16 cents for the year.
And then,
Can't help you if you buy a new car or you add another car or.
but you'd think it was new. The teacher salary, I'm happy about, that's fine. And let's see, have 3 units, this is the, I'm glad to see that we're increasing the evolve from adding 2 additional units. I think safety is very important. And let me ask you a question now. Do we know what the state is going to approve this year as to what they're going to give us?
Based on, and Julie was, I think, listening to them at 11:30, 12 o'clock last night, whatever time they got through.
I'm sorry, Julie.
But,
you should have called me. I was up.
Of all the back and forth and all the stuff about everything else in the world that they've talked about, there seems little likelihood that we'll get more money, and there seems almost no likelihood we'll get less money. Even though they're at a point they could change things, that they had no disagreement of any substantive issue on education funding between the House and the Senate. They pretty much approved, maybe not the exact dollar amount, but they pretty much approved what the state superintendent asked for. They pretty much approved what the governor asked for, except a $2,000 bonus or $2,500 bonus. Neither house approved that, but they approved everything else. So the likelihood of that changing is pretty minimal. Even though they're out there in this free-for-all where they can discuss anything and everything, normally by this time of the year, they've gone like the conference committee, you know it's going to be between this number and this number. They still got free conference, but there's no indication any of that will change. There's just none. There's no traction for any of it to change. The last thing they put in, obviously, was a cost to us, despite our trying to explain repeatedly. We're fine, we're great with maternity, paternity leave. What we're not great with is you've now granted that with no additional funding, and there's just no way it won't cost more money. There are 3 school districts that already do it. Every one of them spent more money this year doing that than they did in previous years. And theirs is different from the state version. In their versions, the 3 that did it, you must take all your sick leave. Anything short of 12 weeks, between 6 and 12, they would provide for you if you've already taken all your sick leave. So that narrowed their financial liability. So what we ended up doing is we took the largest of those districts and we prorated what they spent. We took the calculation that the finance officers through the state did, utilizing their estimated percentage of people who would either become pregnant or take paternity leave. And we came up with a number between the proportioned number based on actual expense in a slightly different program and what the state said it was, and you have our best estimate of what it will cost. Now, again, in our budget, if we missed it by $200,000 or $300,000, we can figure that out during the course of the year. But it will have an added cost. That's in there. In fact, it's on the way to be signed, and it'll take effect 45 days after the governor's signature. Because it's not in the budget. It was a separate action.
So just looking, I don't see many people. I see some from the public, but not many. So when we vote on this millage increase, and when the newspaper publishes or TV, whatever, people will call and be upset that we're going to have, what's the millage increase that we're looking at, Robin?
9 mills.
9 mills. So what I would like for you to do publicly is say, you can come and voice your concerns at what meeting, what date? What's the date? It's.
We certainly do that. We already do that.
I want it done today because I want everyone to know that.
What's the day?
If you have a concern, come.
June 5th.
Say again?
June 5th,
What time?
6 o'clock.
In this building.
in this
June
building.
5th, 6 o'clock in this building.
Okay, so I knew that, but I wanted it to come out today because I get calls, but I always say, you have to come to the meetings and voice your opinion. And they go, we can't get off work. And I'm saying, I still need for you to voice your opinion. So I thank you, and I appreciate the budget and your answers, and thank y'all for working so diligently on looking at all avenues of our district and the betterment of our employees and teachers and staff and bus drivers and everybody else. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bush.
You. This past weekend, I became very interested in speech language therapists because I was talking to someone who is a speech language therapist in Greenville County. And I'm looking at page 9 about speech language therapists, and I want to ask, how many do we have in our system now?
We currently have 103 speech pathologists.
Oh, 103, okay.
One additional is the speech pathologist that is a assistive technology. And the ask here is for an additional one to be assistive technology as well, so that we would have 2 in the district.
So we would have 2 additional ones, so we would actually have 105.
If this is granted, we would go to, yes, it would be 105 total. One of them performs duties that are solely about assistive technology, and this ask is about a second one to do assistive technology.
Okay. Now, one of the things this speech therapist was telling me about, which is, I guess, a frustration for a speech therapist, is that they only get paid based on their number of years of experience working in a education system with children. They don't get any credit for working with adults in the speech therapy program. And I guess it's basically kind of a very similar system. And so some people have not been able to become speech therapists because they have to take cut pay. So she asked me to ask about that. I think it might be a state thing, so.
Yeah, I do believe what she's talking to is about what the state would credit regarding how many years that you would have experience. I can speak to that personally as a speech pathologist initially. When I came to the school system, I had been in the hospital system, so what they want to know is how many years were you working with children? And we have worked with Ms. Horton there to actually work with some folks in the legislature. That is something that we will be asking for them to take a look at next year, maybe at the State Department, to really look at that and change that, because we do believe with the training that they have, it is all levels, and that if someone works in a rehab center for a year, they shouldn't lose that year and make that not be competitive for us. So for them to be able to come to the school system. So what she's talking about, or what she likely was mentioning to you, was about how the state was interpreting that, yes.
Wonderful, thank you. I would appreciate that going forward very much.
Ms. Horton has it on her calendar and she's working on it with us.
Oh, I know it will happen then.
Thank you.
Another question I had. Now, as far as the fringe benefits go, I guess they're included, that's great. And I was happy to hear that if teachers are involved in extracurricular activities, they do get paid for that now?
I'll
Compensated?
remind you of the modifier I used with that, significant time. Every teacher that does something extracurricular is not compensated. You will have in your appendix a list of all the supplements that are paid. So you'd find something in there like you would find speech and debate. You'd find youth orchestra. You'd find JV volleyball. You'd find intramurals. There are a number of supplements. Some are academic extracurricular. Some are co-curricular. I mean, I would argue that almost all of them are co-curricular. But there is not a supplement for everything teachers do after hours. This budget would be significantly larger than it currently is if we were able to do that. It would be nice to be able to do that, but the line of demarcation has been the required extra time, days, months, because the ones you'll see in there, when I say significant, they're over months and in a lot of cases daily during that period of time.
Because they do, when they're involved in those extracurricular activities, takes up a big portion of their time. Also, do teachers get personal days off? And I know they get 4. Okay. So if there's a death in the family or something like that,
Death in the family is separate.
Okay.
If there's a death in the family, it is 3 days, Robin, not counted towards your personal days. So 3 days. And death in the family is defined in your policy, father, mother, sister, brother, son, daughter, in-law to the same degree. And I think there's even, it says that, like if you grew up in the household with, or something like that.
And sick days are separate from that?
That would come not from your personal leave, is it deducted from your sick leave, Ron? So from total sick leave, which are uncapped. In our district, unless you use them, you never lose them. We have people that have 400 sick days.
Can you share those sick days?
No, ma'am.
Okay. When you retire, do those go towards, do they count as any kind of money?
When you retire, 45 of those days can be counted towards your average final compensation and your time worked. So if you worked 30 years and you got 45 sick days, you can count 30 years plus 45 days. Everything over that, by your policy, an employee is entitled to $10 for each of the days over that. So if you had 390, you used 45, now you got 345, you get a check for $3,450.
But you're not allowed to share those days, like if someone got really sick, you can't do that.
No, and I think every time that's been examined, and there was a board committee that looked at sick leave and personal leave policies, I believe that was about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe not that long ago. And that was one of the items that was discussed, and I think the general feeling was, we're very unusual in school districts in South Carolina that we don't cap sick leave. Most districts, it's 90 days. And in some districts, it's 90 days plus the number you earn. Once you get 90, the number you earn in the next year. But then if you don't use them, you lose them at the end of that year, and you get the next 14 or 15 for the next year. But you can't ever carry over from one year to the next more than 90. That's the most common in South Carolina. Ours is very unusual in that it has no cap. So if you've been fortunate and not had experienced a lot of illness, you got, and we've had some people that have had very significant illnesses at a point in their career, and because of that, they've not lost any wages. They may have been away from work for a year. Because even if you're a 12-month employee in a year, that's 245 days.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton. Ms. Goodwin Caldwell.
Thank you for the information. And I'm so glad to see that we are always in support of our teachers, faculties, and staffs, and giving them what they need to do their job. I have a couple of questions on that increase for instructional budget. Well, my first question is with the state mandates. Are any of those, do we get any funds from the state for those mandates, or are all of those 6 things on here, 5 things on here, are those unfunded mandates?
They don't really fund it that way. If you go back to, it's in your, I think Nancy would have to load it again, but it should be in your handout. In that PowerPoint, there's a chart that showed how much money we got from the state. I think she can pull that back up, maybe quicker than I can thumb through and find it. Keep going. Looks like that. There we go. All right, so we got $40 million in new revenue from the state. If you add up all their mandates, it adds up to $36.3 million. So this year, we got more money than what they mandated. That doesn't happen every year. Now, what that doesn't include is a pay raise for anybody, except a teacher to move up the step. If they got 19 years, move to step 20. That's all that funds. It doesn't fund the $2,500.
So when they said that they were giving that $4,000 to the teachers, and so that was basically an unfunded mandate.
Well, what they would say to you is, we didn't mandate that. They didn't mandate that.
Okay, they saying that they don't.
They said we provided $4,000 to raise teacher pay. Now, they did a little better job saying that this year. Here's what they said, I believe their exact words. $2,500 that you must apply to the state minimum salary schedule if you pay the minimum salary schedule. How many school districts paid a minimum salary schedule, Stephanie? 1? At one time, they were down to like only 1.
But we've always been
Maybe
over.
when they moved it to 40, they picked up some more.
We've always been over what the state says to pay.
Yes.
Right?
Now, the other way to look at that, we didn't calculate this out. We just never done it because we know what we have to do. You can't reduce what you pay a teacher. Not that we're looking to do that. You can't, when you establish a salary,
Right.
you've now established a minimum salary in your school district for teachers. So you can't go, we don't want to, certainly not recommending that. You can't, but you can't go back. But that in essence becomes a mandate. Right. Salary that you pay. But the way they worded that is $2,500 to move the state minimum schedule. Well, it's not going to move our schedule.
Right.
I mean, there's a little bit in there. You see the difference. You could move it by what, about $4.5 million? That'd be all you'd have to spend. All right, that doesn't include growth. Doesn't include opening that new facility. I mean, it doesn't include anything else. And this year we got a considerable amount of increase in state revenue. But if we're gonna continue to be, as we should be, aggressive in teacher pay, I'm not sure we'll never get enough from them to be aggressive in teacher pay. In fact, one of them was quoted yesterday, one of the legislators, responding to, I believe it was York One's increase in salary. They bumped their teachers $3,000. And he in fact made the point of quoting that that's what it took, the combination of state and local effort to be able to do that. And that's what it takes.
Okay. Moving on. On the bus driver increase, what is that pay range? I know you gave us the top rate was $23.54, but what is the pay range? What do they a beginning bus driver make?
Stephanie.
What's that pay range?
It's on page 8. On page 8. So
She has to go to the appendix.
So right now, R2 at 19 is the entry rate and 21.26.
19 is the entry rate.
Yes, ma'am. So with the $2.28, that would take us to 21.28 and 23.54.
Now, let me ask you this. Do they work a regular 37.5 hour week, or I know it's hourly for them, but do they work
Dale Allred
between
said back there,
37 and 40 hours a week?
We'll defer to him, but I'm gonna guess it's somewhere between 42 and 47, maybe, Dale?
That's typically where it ends up.
Okay.
Most of our bus drivers are on paper a 6-hour day.
Uh-huh.
But by that time they do field trips, midday cover, open route.
Okay.
Bus driver shortage. Over a week, it ends up between 40 and 50 hours a week.
Okay.
And there is a $1 an hour differential if you're a floating driver still. So, in other words, you don't have an assigned route, because that's more difficult if you go into a different route every day. There's a $1 an hour pay differential on top of that.
Okay.
And we still have attendance and safety bonus that they can earn by being at work and not having an accident, which can help them. What it ends up doing is helping them through the summer, because we pay that at the end of the year. So it helps them through the summer months. And I don't remember, what's the top end they can earn on that, though?
That is $10 per day for the 180 school days. And last year's board approved double that for the 5.
And I'm sorry, you all may not know Dale Allred. He's the number 2 person in transportation. He's here in Adam James' seat today.
Hi, Bill.
Y'all, you've probably seen him before, but you might not. I should have introduced him earlier.
Thank you. Okay. Also on page 8, the teachers for the multilingual learners, why are we below what the state recommends as the ratio of 60-1 when we're at 80-1?
Cost.
Okay, are we trying to get anywhere closer to that?
Yeah, we've moved that consistently. We started at is it 1?
It's 138-1 to 1.
And we're down to 80-1. We've moved it considerably over the years. So, of course, there's also a challenge in getting the people, but the big challenge with that is the cost. And when we get to the point where we come in kind of the final point of recommendation, then we start looking at our priorities as far as increased teacher pay for other employees, improving our ratios, particularly in some of these support areas like the special needs areas you saw, multilingual learners. It at some point just becomes a balancing act. What do we feel like we can get in there that is reasonable? And again, we know this requires a significant commitment on the part of the taxpayers and on you all's part to commit to a tax increase. So it's always a balancing act. But just like almost everything in there, and we referenced a number of those in the presentation when we talked about moving the entry-level pay from 10-something an hour to 15 an hour. We talked about the progress we've made with teacher salary from moving from like 23 to number 3. Almost every one of those things is incremental progress. Some years we've been able to take bigger steps than other years, but it's all been incremental to try to balance out what is reasonable and appropriate with what we feel like is most important for us to do. There's nothing, like in this big book right here, there's nothing in here that was bad or wrong. There's nothing. But at some point, there are only a certain number of resources, and we want to make sure that we're recommending to you to put them in the place where we can get the most benefit out of them for our students.
Okay. I have a comment about the transition coordinator. I'm glad to see that we are having that. We got that for special ed, but I would hope in the future that we be able to track post-secondary on a lot more students than just the special ed students. Because I know that we always ask, and sometimes we ask for data about different subgroups after they leave our school system. I would hope that we, and not just special ed services, but we are able to get transition coordinators for other programs in the district. One more thing with the, I'm glad to see that we are moving from AA to AP, especially in the smaller schools. But when I looked at this additional items considered, how do you prioritize what to choose from these? Because aren't the APs, AAs aren't they the testing coordinators now? I'm glad to see that we're giving them more money.
Not in every case. That was for a standalone test coordinator. And quite honestly, when we looked through the budget, we didn't believe
I see how much it was going to cost.
Yeah, it was $7 million.
So
that was not something we felt rose to the level we ought to include.
So do the APs, AAs, are they still testing coordinators?
In some schools, not in every school. The person that we do not allow to be the testing coordinator is the counselor. Now, that doesn't mean they don't maybe have some role in testing, but not to be the testing coordinator.
So we did, adjust the school counselors' allocations to the 250.
Yeah, they're down to 250 to 1 at the secondary school.
Okay.
We added counselors last year to reduce the ratio in the elementary schools at the larger elementary schools.
Okay, guidance counselors, it said to a 220-day work schedule. How many days do they work now?
They work 220 now.
Guidance clerks.
They're currently 185.
They're currently at 185?
Yes, ma'am.
But you all approved
so
last year moving the counselors to 220. What year was that, Stephanie? Guidance counselor.
So do we need the guidance clerks more than 185 days? Because I mean, this was one of the items to be considered to move them to 220.
Two of the reasons we didn't include that, number one, they have the flexibility to use their clerk days whenever they need to use them, not just their guidance clerks, but any clerks in the school. Okay. Second is, we added those days, we did that to ensure that at the secondary schools, there's a counselor there every day. So when students come in to enroll and select classes and get into courses they need to have for graduation, there's somebody there to deal with them. We didn't feel after we had done that we necessarily needed to go back and add some clerical help to accomplish the same task.
Okay.
That it didn't rise to the level of some of those other things.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell. I have Ms. Presley on Zoom. Is there a way she can ask questions?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, thank you, Ann.
Wonderful. Dr. Royster, I just wanted to very quickly thank you and your leadership team for the immense amount of work that has gone into this. I echo my fellow trustees' sentiments regarding our remaining as competitive as possible with teacher pay. And I believe we are doing a very aggressive, very appropriate job with that. Kudos to the changes with the AP situation, and I will be sure to share this information about June 5th with folks as well. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Ms. Presley.
Thank you.
Dr. Stiles.
Dr. Royster, as a result of my service this year on the task force, it was brought to light that nurses in our state are grossly underpaid, especially when we compare what they're making in our schools compared to what they're making in hospitals and other settings that are appropriate for a nurse. And that is a great concern. I'm very pleased on page 12 where you've mentioned a $2,000 increase to all nurses. But I'm interested in knowing exactly where that puts us on the range, the minimum salary for a nurse, all the way up, the highest paid salary. I know you may not be able to provide that today, but I would very much like to know what that is.
No, I was pointing at you, Stephanie. I don't know why you're looking around.
Okay.
Oh. Do y'all have that with you?
I didn't bring that with me. We can get that
We
for you.
moved the schedule by 3% and then put 2,000 on the base. We'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to receive that. And if, I'm just thinking out loud, if when we review that as a board and we deem that we still feel like our nurses are underpaid, and perhaps we wanted to make a recommendation to increase that $2,000, do we have any room to consider that without further increasing the millage? I'd like for that question to be answered, because I really would like to encourage our board to look at the data on our school nurses and possibly look at further extending the $2,000 to the highest degree possible without further increasing the millage.
You know, at this point, based on the revenue estimates we have, it would require removing something or increasing the millage. Certainly, we'd want you to have the information of what dollar amount are we talking about. And I know you already know that we'll never be able to compete with the hospital.
Yes.
Now, we offer some things they don't. Skip time, schedule, work if you have children, work when they're in school. We also have to, and we'll send this to you as well. We have some nurses that are 4-year college graduates, 4-year RNs. We have some nurses that are 2-year RNs. We have maybe some 2-year LPNs, but we have some LPNs that simply have LPN certification. So we have nurses right now across the board. We're paying them the same, unless they're a satellite nurse or a nurse supervisor. And although we pay them on what looks like a professional salary schedule, they're actually hourly employees. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, they're hourly employees. So if they work more than 40 hours, we have to pay them time and a half or give them comp time. It kind of looks like they get a salary because that's the way we pay them, but we're required to treat them as hourly employees based on the overall classification of what they do, unless they're a supervisor or the director of nursing.
Well, based on that, then I would really like to see their salary broken down into an hourly rate, into a range of that. I'd like to see that in comparison to our bus drivers and other employees with hourly rates. I'd like to understand that just a little bit better, because I just want to feel that we are also on the right path, since this is a noted problem statewide, and our nurses are valuable. And I know we have a very limited number, less than 5, right, of the LPNs in our district.
I believe there's 6 of them. I think that's right.
So I would like further exploration on that and maybe some further discussion at our next budget reading. I'd like to look at that and review that. Thank you.
Are there any further questions, comments, Ms. Middleton?
I have just one pretty quick one. Teachers, for language teachers, English as a second language. Okay, how many of those do we have? Is that a specific teacher, or is that under multilingual learners?
Yes, that's the same. They keep changing what to call those people. They were ESL teachers, they were ESOL teachers, then there were MLL teachers, and now they're ML teachers. It's the same bunch of people.
This is page 9, I guess. So how many do we have in the school system?
I don't know that we have that number in here today, but we'll send that to you. they'll have to pull that from HR and from, I guess you can pull it from staffing. It's not a standalone certification, it's an add-on. So they would have been certified to teach something else, and they added on ML certification. You don't necessarily have to be bilingual, trilingual, whatever beyond trilingual would be, to attain the certification. Although a significant number of our ML teachers are multilingual.
Are there some,
themselves.
okay, are there some of them that that's all they do? Like maybe
Yes.
they go to different schools and they don't.
There's some, that's all they do in the school they're in. There'd be a few that are shared. I don't know exactly how many, but we'll get you those numbers.
I know I've heard from some of them that we need more, that they're really overburdened.
Well, that's why we've tried to consistently reduce the pupil-teacher ratio for multilingual teachers.
And we're adding some on here, is that what we're saying?
We're adding them at the schools where 50% or more of their population is multilingual. We're dropping their ratio further than the ratio we have now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton. Any further questions or comments? I do have one if we're finished. It would not be budget season if we didn't talk about Act 388. As I start to look around, there's fewer and fewer of us up here that were here during Act 388.
I was having a good day when you brought that up.
On page 3, this is a great explanation of, I think maybe this is the first time I've ever seen it presented like this, and this is a great explanation of the changes to protected local revenue. And the 9 meals, it has a good explanation there of how the amounts for each year that's carried over. I know it says up there, the carryover millage is 18.2, correct? But I want to confirm that if you look at that chart down there, there's a very important number on it, which says the cumulative allowable millage not levied. The most we could levy right now under the current formula is 25.3 mils, correct?
Plus the 9.
Plus the 9. So that would be a total of
34.3.
No, I just want to, it might seem obvious to some of us that have been through several budgets. I mean, but I remember the days when the formula was different and the county auditor had to add all this millage for growth, for consumer price index, and we had 2 meals we could work with. When I came on this board was restricted to 2 meals. And so it still is breathtaking to me when I open up a budget and it says 9 meals. I mean, it's still, because I remember those days when you just dreamed of being able to pay teachers so that they didn't have to work 2 and 3 jobs, to be able to open the new facilities, to be able to gradually keep up with the growth that's going on in Greenville County. So, but it's still scary when you look at 9 meals because it's a different formula now because of Act 388 and changes that took place in the law. So I just want to say it's for 9 meals, and sitting up here as a small business owner with more than a dozen vehicles that I have to pay property taxes on, I have to do lots of splaining to my husband and my daughter in our business. So thank you for always including the flower shop in there. And the only thanks I have at this point is that I'm the second highest paying of the examples. I'm just glad I'm not a pharmacy at this point. So, but in the grand scheme of things, 9 meals out of 34 meals, I would consider this board to be taking very conservative action. Because as you can see in that big book of wants that we've heard our superintendent say, and we've heard our board members say, that we wanted issues addressed, like our nurses, different items addressed. We are being very conservative and addressing what we think is just our ability to be competitive, our ability to take care of our teachers and all of our employees. Because I remember when we struggled to give teachers a raise, and our other employees, that's how I think we got so far behind, was that we just said, let's give the teachers a raise. And there were so many of our hourly employees that's what this district runs on, is those hourly employees. So just wanted to point that out, and thank you all for all of the.
I got one question.
Sure. Mr. Sailors.
Well, you opened the door. We're not leaving any millage on the table. We're utilizing everything that we can carry forward, correct?
So from year 2023, we still have 0.2 mills left.
0.2.
0.2.
That has a value of what, about $500,000?
About 300,000. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then we still have the 9 mills from last year, or this current year, FY23.
But my point being is, we're not losing anything in the recommendation that you have.
There's no use or lose millage above the recommended increase.
Yes.
Wasn't that really your question?
That's it. Just don't want to leave anything on the table.
A couple of points about that. One, just to highlight on that same page that Ms. Bush was on. What the state said to meet student growth and inflation is the equivalent of 16 mills. That's the formula they use to say this is what you should do. Well, we showed you earlier how much the state increased state revenue. To Ms. Bush's point about the EFA, during the time of EFA, there was a maintenance of effort requirement. So when the state increased funding, the point that she made about the auditor had to add millage, there was a required amount that the local school district had to increase their local funding to match. It wasn't a one-to-one match, but to match the state's increase. That actually lasted into the passage of Act 388, but was repealed 2 years after its first year of implementation. The other thing, we didn't really talk about it, but if you look at economic impact, most economists would say, almost all of them will say, there is a more than $1 impact to a $1 increase in wages or $1 put into the local economy. If you look at it sort of on average, a lot of them would propose that it was between $1.20 and $1.50. So for every dollar you're putting into the economy, you're getting $1.20 return on it, or $1.50 return on it. So while we're obviously removing dollars from the local economy, at the end of that process, while it might not come back equally to people in the economy, depending on what kind of business you're in and where people spend their money, it has a multiplier effect. And that's between 20 and 50 cents on a dollar. So hopefully they will buy more flowers, or have more machine tool work done, or get more items at the drugstore.
All right. All right. Seeing no further.
Deadline for questions.
Yes. Let's go back to that.
Ms. Thomas, deadline for questions, please.
It is on the agenda. Where is it? There it is. Sorry, Thursday, 1 week from today, May 18th.
And one last reminder of the public comment and second reading.
That is correct. So second reading will be on June 5th with a public hearing at 6 p.m. and the second reading itself beginning at 6:30, June 5th, here in the boardroom.
Thank you very much. Hearing no further comments, again, thank you. Can't thank all of you enough for all the hard work that went into this. And I want to thank our board members for, also want to remind us too that, I know this is a busy time of year, but we have a couple of board members that are having some family health issues. And let's just remember them in our thoughts and our prayers and our positive energy going out there, and to everyone this time of year as we kind of wrap up and fold everything together, and take care of yourselves and take care of one another. And I will entertain a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and unanimous seconds to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. We stand adjourned.